since the debate's been out, I've been getting loads of questions about the content. So it's a lot of concepts from Alex, from myself, and it can get quite confusing. So what I was thinking about doing is, rather than answering each question, and even last night I was trying to explain a particular point and it was taking me a long time, I'll make a series of videos in which I won't make any new points, but I will just explain the points that were covered in the debate. Play a clip from the debate and then just basically elaborate on that point. So the first thing I think I should mention is about moral nihilism. So moral nihilism means that morality isn't true or it isn't false. It's not the same as the idea that, there's the idea of moral skepticism, right? So there may be some truth out there, but we don't really know it. That's not what moral nihilism. Moral nihilism is there is no right answer. So in my opening, what I did is I explained why atheism leads to moral nihilism based upon the works of this guy, Alex Rosenberg. He's written this book called The Atheist Guide to Reality. And in this book, he basically argues the atheist has to be a moral nihilist. And he gives the argument from core morality. Now, core morality, I'm just going to play the clip and I'm going to play Alex's reaction and then explain how that all fits together.
Now, what I want to do is this. For the first premise, that atheism leads to moral nihilism, I'm going to be using the argument of the philosopher of biology, Alex Rosenberg. Now, what's the time? Sorry, because
you've got 15 minutes left.
15 minutes left. Can you give me 5 and 3, please? So, Alex Rosenberg, what he basically does is this. He gives an argument for why atheism leads to moral nihilism. Now, the first thing he does is he establishes the idea of core morality. Core morality is basically something all human beings agree to. So things like you have the right to what you've earned, don't hurt an innocent person, don't hurt a child, especially your own, so on. However, we have in the world different moral codes. And according to him, the reason why we have different moral codes is that we have different beliefs, but we have the same core morality. Now, this core morality is something which evolved over time. And now, like Alex mentioned, the way that, if we just cared about ourselves, if we play game theory over time, our genes are not likely to survive in the environment. And henceforth, if we just keep extrapolating from that, then you start having the expanding circle and people are being more nice to each other. So what he does is he speaks about core morality as an adaptation. And what he says and he gives a new version of Plato's dilemma. He says, is core morality true, therefore it was selected? Or is it the case that it was selected, therefore it's true? And of course, both of these are absurd. So therefore he concludes that moral nihilism is the only conclusion for an atheist to hold. And therefore atheism undermines human rights. Which one of these do you disagree with?
I disagree with the atheism leading to moral nihilism. You kind of co-opted Plato's Euthyphro dilemma.
I didn't. I used Alex
you used somebody else doing it. To say, so of course the traditional Euthyphro dilemma being
for God.
An argument against morality and God. Are things good because God commands them, or does God command them because they're good? And if I understand the version that you're using, is this moral statement true because it's selected for, or is it selected for because it's true? Now, of course, myself, I can't believe that it's selected for because it's true, right? Like we'd agree that would be nonsensical in my worldview. But we have to be careful here. I can say something like it is true because it's selected for. Now, what I mean by this is when I talked about the expanding circle of Peter Singer, I explained why it is that we have certain moral propositions, why it is that we have certain moral desires. I then separately justify why we act in accordance with those desires. So I can say that something would be selected for, right? Or something can be true because it's selected for, like an experience of pleasure, like the ability to experience pleasure and pain. That's something that's selected for. And it becomes true, because it's been selected for, that suffering is an experience. Suffering is something that exists. From that we can then reason morally.
So what you said there, I'm just going to use that and change the variables again. If we evolved under different environmental conditions and they were selected for, and I didn't have time to go deeply into why Alex Rosenberg denied the second that it was selected for, therefore it's true. In that case, then killing the elderly would be selected for, and that would be, according to you, a good thing.
It's interesting. It's like you bring up the point put to Richard Dawkins. I think you're quoting my friend Justin Brierley
Yes.
there, who put that question to him, and I put it to him myself, and he has this kind of, well, I guess, I don't know, I think it's, and goes off on some nothing about
He waffles, yeah.
about pleasure and pain. But here's the thing, I don't think that the thing that has been selected for, that is an ability to experience pleasure and pain, I don't think that can be different, right?
Okay, so that's where I disagree with you again. And
So in the opening, I said either core morality, this morality that we share, is true, therefore it's selected, or the case that it was selected, therefore it's true. Okay, so that's Alex Rosenberg's New Plato's Dilemma for Darwinism. Now, Cosmic, he basically took the the second option. He said it's because it was selected, core morality was selected, therefore it's actually true. So I explained obviously why that is incorrect, and I wanted to just go over why Alex Rosenberg thinks that that is also incorrect. So I'm just going to literally read out his argument here. Now remember, I didn't want to read the whole, chapter, definitely not, and not even the whole section. So this is actually chapter number 5, Morality, the Bad News. And this is page 109. Is natural selection so smart that it was able to filter out all of the wrong, incorrect, false core moralities and end up with the only one that just happens to be true? Or is it the other way around? Natural selection filtered out all but one core morality, and winning the race is what made the last surviving core morality the right, correct, true one. Which is it? It can't be either one. The only way out of this puzzle is nihilism. Our core morality isn't true, right, correct, and neither is any other. Nature just seduced us into thinking it's right. It did that because that made core morality work better. Our believing in its truth increases our individual genetic fitness. Consider the second alternative first. Natural selection filtered out all of the other variant core moralities, leaving just one core morality, ours. It won the race, and that's what made the last surviving core morality, our core morality, the right, correct, true one. This makes the rightness, correctness, truth of our core morality a result of its evolutionary fitness. But how could this possibly be the answer to the question of what makes our core morality right? There doesn't seem to be anything in itself morally right about having lots of children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren, or even doing things that make having kids more likely. But this is all the evolutionary fitness of anything comes to. The first alternative is the explanation for the correlation that we'd like to accept. Core morality is the right, binding, correct, true one, and that is why humans have been selected for detecting that it is the right core morality. But natural selection couldn't have been discerning enough to pick out the core morality that was independently the right, true, or correct one. There are several reasons it had little chance of doing so. First, there is lots of evidence that natural selection is not very good at picking out true beliefs, especially scientific ones. Natural selection shaped our brain to seek stories with plots. The result was, as we've been arguing since chapter 1, the greatest impediment to finding the truth about reality. The difficulty that even atheists have in understanding and accepting the right answers to the persistent questions shows how pervasively natural selection has obstructed true beliefs about reality. Mother Nature's method of fostering false beliefs on us were so subtle they've only recently begun to be detected. By the 16th century, some people were beginning to think about reality the right way. But natural selection had long before structured the brain to make science difficult, as we'll see in later chapters. The brain was selected for taking all sorts of shortcuts in reasoning. That was adaptive in a hostile world, but it makes valid logical reasoning and especially statistical inference difficult. Without the ability to reason from evidence, getting things right is a matter of good luck at best. Second, there is strong evidence that natural selection produces lots of false but useful beliefs. Just think about religion, any religion. Every one of them is chock full of false beliefs. We won't shake any of them. There are so many. they are so long-lasting that false religious beliefs must have conferred lots of adaptive advantages on believers. For example, it's widely thought that religious beliefs are among the devices that enforce niceness within social groups. The hypothesis that organized religion has adaptive function for people and groups is backed up by a fair amount of evolutionary human biology. It couldn't have done so except through the false beliefs it inculcates. Of course, all the religious beliefs that natural selection fostered on people made acquiring scientific truths about the world much more difficult. There is a third reason to doubt that natural selection arranged for us to acquire the true morality. It is really good at producing and enforcing norms that you and I think are immoral. It often selects for norms that we believe to be morally wrong, incorrect, and false. In fact, a good part of the argument against many of these immoral beliefs rests on the fact that natural selection can explain why people still mistakenly hold them. There are lots of moral values and ethical norms that enlightened people reject, but which Mother Nature has strongly selected for. Racism and xenophobia are optimally adapted to maximize the representation of your genes in the next generation, instead of some stranger's genes. Consider the almost universal patriarchal norms of female subordination. They are all the result of Darwinian process. We understand why natural selection makes the males of almost any mammalian species bigger than the females. Male competition for access to females selects for biggest, strongest males, and so makes males on average bigger than females. The greater male-to-male competition, the greater the male-female size difference. We also know that in general, there will be selection for individuals who are bigger and stronger and therefore impose their will on those who are weaker, especially when it comes to maximizing the representation of their genes in the next generation. But just because the patriarchy is an inevitable outcome of natural selection is no reason to think it's right, correct, or true. In fact, once we can see sexism is the result of natural selection's search for solutions to the universal design problems of leaving the most viable and fertile offspring, some of us are on the way to rejecting its norms. We can now explain away sexism as a natural prejudice that enlightened people can see right through. In different environments, natural selection has produced other arrangements. Consider, for example, the social insects, where the top of the hierarchy is always a female. Natural selection sometimes selects for false beliefs and sometimes even selects against the acquisition of true beliefs. It sometimes selects for norms we reject as morally wrong. Therefore, it can't be a process that's reliable for providing us with what we consider correct moral beliefs. The fact that our moral core is the result of a long process of natural selection is no reason to think that our moral core is right, true, or correct. That was, I hope, a thorough explanation for why Alex Rosenberg, the philosopher of biology that I referred to in my opening, says an atheist has to be a moral nihilist, because that new Plato's dilemma is impossible to solve unless you basically give up and say moral nihilism is the answer. Now, I'm going to be covering the other topics. I wanted to cover, obviously there's loads of other things we were discussing in the debate, and there's a lot of disagreement. So I'll cover each one individually, God willing, inshallah. However, I wanted to cover this one first, because if moral nihilism is the conclusion that an atheist has to come to, then that has a significant impact on their behavior, and of course it has a significant impact on undermining human rights. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know your thoughts.